Welcome to Bad Takes. I'm Laura McGann, the executive editor of Grid, and I'm here with contributing editor to Grid, Matthew Iglesias.
Hello.
Hey, Matt. So, do you have a bad take this week?
I do. I got a take. I did not think it was good. So this is a take. It appeared in the website Vox about a month ago, and it says, "Your stuff is actually worse now. How the cult of consumerism ushered in an era of badly made products," by Izzy Ramirez. And, you know, it starts with an interesting fact. At least it was interesting to me. She says that a bra that she had for 10 years broke, and she went to get she liked it, so she wanted to buy another one, and the new one that she got was worse. And, you know, then there's like an explanation of why, like, this specific product's successor was a kind of more cheaply made thing. I do not know a lot about women's clothing, women's underwear in particular. I thought that was an interesting kind of story. I don't know if it's true or not.
I do know a lot about this subject, and I felt for her. I know what she's talking about. You go and you buy the identical product. Sometimes it's even a year later or something, and it's not the same, whether it's quality or just... Yeah, there's different ways to capture not as good. But I felt her pain. I was aware and found it interesting, even though it was not surprising to me.
But this then spins out in a weird kind of way, for instead of being like, here's an article about some facts about the bra industry,
sure,
to the claim that in general, this is the trajectory of consumer goods in the United States of America, that if you replace that if you buy new versions of things that were available 10 or 20 years ago, what you can get today is worse. And that this is a broad general trend about, you know, as that subhead said, consumerism, right? Like the operations of global capitalism. And I'm reading that, you know, on my iPhone, as one does. And I'm thinking, well, okay, if I replaced my 10-year-old iPhone with a contemporary iPhone, that would not be worse.
I thought the piece was going to be about fast fashion. And the piece would explain that there's been this shift in the approach that certain segments, are a big part of the fashion industry, now wants you to buy new things all the time. It's the H&M model, the Zara model. I mean, even now, Target, Old Navy, what have you. And if you look back 100 years, something like 20% of your budget, an American's budget, went to their clothing. And they had a small, you had a small closet of clothes, just a small wardrobe. Now it's something like 10 or 11% of our income goes to clothes, but we have a ton. We buy a ton of stuff. I'm using the proverbial we. Most Americans are buying a ton of stuff. And that's just how it's moved. And there's been some good stuff on this. I went back and kind of looked. And there is an explanation. Like, her bra really fits this model that they don't want, the industry doesn't want you to keep your bra for 10 years.
Here's my question, right? If we limit to fast fashion, right? Because here's my model of what's going on there, which is that people, women, are interested in fashion. And so they like the idea of having new clothing frequently. And that when it became economically possible to execute the fast fashion concept,
Zara, H&M, I mean, back in the day, Forever 21 still exists. I don't know, the one in DC closed, so I don't know. But they were meeting a market need, right? That this wasn't just, okay, we're going to foist this on people, but these stores realized if we do this, it's a good business model for us. That there are consumers who want to shop this way.
So the explanation here, which is an interesting business story, right, is that as described in the piece, the basic t-shirt bra, which is like not an interesting fashion item, it's like
it's a staple, sure.
Staple of your wardrobe, is the victim of this fast fashion trend, right? Because if the idea is, look, you want like cute new dresses every season, you don't really intend to hang on to it for a long time, the incentive is to make things that aren't that durable, because what's interesting about it is the designs, right? And that they can change every year. And so certain things that are like not interesting become both boring and also junky.
Right.
Which is like an unfortunate downside of people. I bring this up because my experience of men's apparel has been quite different from that. Right. So what I have experienced in the course of my lifetime is that because digital technology has improved, it's now possible, if you want to get a suit, right, to get sort of made-to-measure suiting much more cheaply than it used to be. You go into a place and they like measure you a bunch of times and they'll like scan your body and they'll take some photos of you and they will send it, right, to Asia. And then something will be made for you, which has a lot of customizations available. The kind of stuff that you like used to need to go to London in person to get can now be done on a mass market basis much more cheaply than it used to be. But a men's suit is much more expensive than stuff that women buy for business purposes. But the flip side of that is that, I mean, again, to generalize, but like broadly speaking, most men are not that interested in clothing and fashion, don't enjoy shopping and changing their style. So the economics of menswear tends toward the idea that you're going to pay a lot of money for a relatively small number of items. You're not going to replace them frequently. And that exists, right? It's like not that like the world has lost the capacity. It's that it genuinely depends that like if you at least fit into a demographic where typically what people want is to have like 3 good suits that you just wear when you need them and you keep them for years as long as you don't like get too fat to fit into them, that like that exists. But that if you're interested in fashion and like to try on new styles and like new stuff, that also exists. So even in this world where like, yes, this bra has maybe gotten junkier, like I think the apparel economy has moved to a place where like more people are getting what they want.
I agree with you on this menswear idea. I had some conversations this weekend about that. And I've heard a lot about this, you know, men who you get your measurements and then you get your suit back and it's far cheaper. I will say in the women's undergarment department, that technology has also opened up access to all kinds of products that were hard to get in stores because at some extent, a store is going to carry a certain number of sizes and colors and styles and whatnot. But on Instagram, I am flooded with all kinds of new types of undergarments that, you know, I've tried out some of them. It's like, oh, okay, this is a new thing.
Right. It's like if 10 sizes will serve 60% of customers.
Or you can customize it, right? Like there are certain websites where you can customize it. If you're a very unusual size, you know, you're a 32 double D, you can type that in and they'll make it for you, for example. So that does exist as well. And I would think that if you were ordering a custom bra 20 years ago, probably would have been pretty expensive, and now it's not, relatively speaking. So there are different sectors of the apparel industry. I also was thinking about, now I can't remember the name of it, my sister loves this website where you order a dress, but most dresses say you're a size 14. The dress is a 14 everywhere. But if you're the kind of person who maybe you're a size 8 from the waist up, but from the waist down, you're a size 14, this website will make that for you and send it to you. And the cost of that, I remember I've looked at the website and it's moderately priced. I would say it's more expensive than a fast fashion item, but what you're getting is you're kind of getting more. So I think the point here is I feel for her on her bra. But there are many opportunities in the bra space to try different things that maybe she would really like at various price points. Also, this is probably not the episode or the show for this, but maybe, Laura's coupon corner over here. I'm happy to one day talk about my enjoyment of deal shoppings of all kinds and apps and when and where to buy undergarments and other things. So, but I think to the bra, she was to not single her out and say, if you're going to spend $30 or $40 on a bra, I could get you a great bra, which I can. However, the point she's making is fair that, there are certain things that have changed, that something that 10 years ago was designed to last you a while may not now.
I don't think it's a coincidence that you kind of say, like, you're joking, but you're not joking, that like you could do Laura's Coupon Corner, right? And like I couldn't. I don't really have shopping and bargain tips. And not every woman really enjoys like shopping for clothing and thinking about styles and fashion, and not every man is resistant to it. But that is a tendency, right?
Sure.
So part of what's happening here is that if you are somebody who what they really want is a handful of well-made pieces that will last a long time, but you're also a woman, you are probably being a little bit ill-served by the trajectory that the marketplace has gone. And at the same time, like there is fast fashion for men, but there is less of it than there is for women. If you are somebody, if you have the marketplace tends to serve the typical person, right? All this dive just into fashion, though, is just to say that that's not even like what this take says.
As an editor, when you have an anecdotal lead, you need the anecdote to represent your broader point. And in this case, she's got this fast fashion point that I'm looking at it, and this is the type of article I'm going to be interested in, right? I shop, I buy things, I like deals, and I'm interested in all of these things. I'm thinking the anecdote is leading me down this fast fashion road, but some of the things that tipped me off, and I thought the photo was weird because it was all these electronics, like broken electronics at the top of the page. So what's with the electronics and the bra? So this is the guts of the piece, is that she pivots to talking about all kinds of industries. She hits on cars, she hits on kitchen appliances, and there's not a lot of evidence there to support her claims. And I think, like you were saying, instantly you were saying, well, my iPhone now is much better than it used to be. And if I bought a 2008 iPhone versus a 2023 iPhone, I'm going to get a better product. And, and of course, immediately my mind went to solar panels. They're a lot cheaper than they used to be, and they're better. This weekend, I just bought one thing that everything I'm looking at now, I'm thinking about this of, is it better or worse? Is it more expensive, less expensive? And now I took some screenshots. I bought an air purifier, like a HEPA filter. Mm-hmm. I bought one, I looked back and, I looked back at my Amazon. I had bought one in 2012 for $265. I got my new HEPA filter for $167, and it performs better. It's proposing that it can get particles out of the air to like point, it's this micro level of particle that it can remove from the air. My old one guarantees less. And no, I spent $100 less. I got a smaller, lighter piece of equipment that performs better and is quieter, and I'm very happy with it. So in that case, I think that's remarkable that in just a 10-year-ish period, it was around 10 or 11 years, I have a much better product.
Well, and I see it sitting on your desk here, right? You've got a MacBook Air here. I don't know if that's the M1 from 2 years ago or the current M2. But like 10 years ago, right, if you got the mid 2012 MacBook Air, it had the low end, it had 128 gigabytes of storage. Now, the cheapest one you can get has twice as much storage as that. The memory, right, has doubled. The pixel density on the screen has doubled in 10 years. It's interesting to me that the article didn't even have the sort of like rote to be sure that like computer stuff has gotten better, because that like people know about that. And I think there are some interesting questions we could say about like what has the impact on society of this incredible increase in the power of computers actually been. But so I'm going to like set that aside, right? So it's like, because we all know that computers have gotten a lot better. The fashion industry has changed. I'm not sure I would agree that it's worse, but it is definitely a little bit junkier. But then there's this whole other realm of things. Like you say, solar panels, right? the electricity mix in the United States over the past 10 years has gotten a lot cleaner.
Yes.
Right? That's a big deal, right? Like, that's the opposite of like, ha ha ha, she hates capitalism, but she's tweeting from her iPhone, right? Like, this is like, it's actually quite important how much particulate air pollution there is. We are burning much less coal than we used to. We have more solar and wind power than we used to have. That's like a big gain. A car today that you buy will be much more fuel efficient than a car from 10 or 20 years ago.
Absolutely. Even if it's even not an electric vehicle, just a car, any kind of car. And I just saw this weekend some breaking news that in the not so distant future, we're looking at EVs being about the same price as gas fueled cars, which is pretty remarkable if you think about what an electric vehicle cost 10 years ago versus now. That's incredible.
If you want an electric car, it's dramatically cheaper. If you want a gas-powered car, it is more fuel efficient than it used to be. All cars today have backup cameras and other kinds of safety features that were expensive add-ons 10 years ago and that didn't exist 20 years ago. This is back to the computers, but it's relevant, like GPS navigation in your car as a standard feature, or something that isn't even in your car because it's on your phone all the time.
There's a graph, but I will paint it with my words, of number of years that Americans keep their cars has been going up, up, up. There's a quote in the piece. It's a designer, and he seems more of a fashion industry person, but he was noting it was sort of a flip thing of Americans now treat cars like sweaters. We're consumers. We buy things and toss them aside. But actually with cars, we're keeping them longer and longer because the quality of the car has improved. There's no reason to get a new car if your car is functioning well. I mean, there are reasons to get a new car. Certainly, you want a new car for all kinds of reasons.
The car thing is actually an interesting counterpoint to the clothing because the option exists. Like, there are people who I know who lease their cars.
Sure.
Right? Now, if you lease your car, that is more expensive than buying a car. Mm-hmm. But the cool thing is you get to trade it in after 2 or 3 years.
Right.
So you always have a newish car.
Right.
And I would never in a million years do that because A, I don't drive that much, and B, I don't care.
Sure.
But like some people do care.
Sure.
Right? And part of what the market does is it creates these multiple opportunities for people. In the case of the automotive industry, the fact that today's cars are more durable helps serve both markets because it means, after you lease a car for 2 or 3 years, they sell it. And it becomes a fleet vehicle for somebody else. So if the car is more durable, then the resale value after that 3-year period is higher, which makes the lease more affordable to the people who do want to lease. And so by increasing the durability of cars, we have served both the market of people like me who just want to drive the car until it doesn't work anymore and the market of people who want to pay a premium to always have the latest and greatest car. With apparel, there have been some gestures in that direction, ideas like Rent the Runway and other stuff like that. Just to say, like, we have these like eddies and trends in both directions. There's actually always a reason. There's an incentive for companies to try to make products that are durable, even to serve a client base of people who want to cycle through them, as long as there's somebody who is interested in buying the used car.
Yeah,
right. It's again, to the extent that doesn't dominate fashion, it's because I don't know what, like, people don't want other people's used clothes maybe, or
Rent the Runway does, they sell the clothes
right
at the end. And I've been surprised the prices that they get for some of these stuff because, a lot of people, a bunch of people have worn them and then they sell them. But it just depends on the item because some of the items probably wear out.
Yeah.
Because other people have worn them and they're only, certain gowns are only designed to be worn so many times. And it kind of makes sense because how many times are you going to wear something like that?
If you're just renting a car, right, like you don't have a ton of incentive to like care about the maintenance and uptake and so on and so forth. That being said, like you don't want to crash the car.
Sure.
Like not for, I mean, there's a financial element to it, but it's just like you try to drive a car in a way that like is not going to wreck it. Whereas like proper use of clothing wears them out. The other thing that is just like totally neglected and like stuff is getting worse is medicines.
Yes.
Continue to improve. We did an episode, we were talking about Wegovy and Ozempic and other sort of obesity medications. What I think we ourselves like yada-yada'd a little bit past is these were originally developed as diabetes treatments. And there's a lot of discourse and takes about their use as just like pure obesity treatments. But as diabetes medication, it seems like it's totally uncontroversial. When unproblematically good things happen, they like drop out of the discourse, and then we can forget to put them in our articles about how things are getting worse. But like the statins for high blood pressure have gotten better.
We also talked just recently about cataract surgery, that this surgery could help something like a huge percentage of people who are blind to be able to see.
Kids don't get chicken pox anymore.
Yeah, that's wild.
Which I didn't realize until I became a parent.
Yeah, no, they get they have a vaccine now. They don't get chicken pox, so they don't miss 2 weeks of school. And it is unfortunate that overall, I think this is for the first time in a long time, health of Americans and life expectancy is actually on the decline. But there has been incredible advances in medicine.
Something that you alluded to, I mean, I don't think we can do a deep dive on life expectancy in this episode because it's a complicated question, but medical technology has definitely improved over time. What's shocking is that for like most of, you go back 100, 150 years, like life expectancy was getting better. And you say, well, why is that? And it's like, well, our public health got better. We had sewers, we had medicine, like it's all good. For the past several years, life expectancy in the United States has been getting worse. And, some of that is COVID, but a lot of it is drug overdoses that were pre-COVID, murders, car accidents have gone up. There's been a lot of stuff going on. And if you want to tell a sort of a pessimistic story about America, like that's a great thing to point to. And I get why some people have sort of pessimism vibes, right? Like down affect, and they want to do articles about how things are bad. But what's interesting about the bad trends in American life, which exist, is that these are things that are getting worse, not like because our stuff is getting worse, but despite the fact that our stuff is getting better. And it raises the question of like why do we care about our stuff? And I puzzle over this all the time because like computers have gotten so much better. In my lifetime, in your lifetime, home entertainments, right? If you had told me 25 years ago, oh, you'll just be able to like fire up like any song that you want to hear, like anytime for $10 a month or whatever it costs, and you'll have like all this streaming video, I'd be like, this is so great. But then you look at how society has evolved, and it doesn't seem to me that we're necessarily all that better off. A lot of social indicators have moved in a bad direction.
I feel like we have to put a pin in that because you and I have varying degrees of you have a theory about loneliness and spending time together and the rise of internet streaming and stuff, but I get when you're talking about the negative vibe of, okay, we have all this stuff. I get more I buy more clothes than ever, and yet it just doesn't feel like good. Like life is getting shorter and people are less healthy. And so it feels like the things that we are consuming in our lives are not better, therefore. And I'm not making the case that that's true. My point is just that in a kind of down moment, you're looking around going, well, what has consumerism done for us? And I could see the argument that it feels like there's a cause and effect here. And I'm not sure that's the case.
I'm not sure that it is either.
Maybe if you're thinking about a piece and you're really upset about your crappy bra and everyone is dying of COVID and like horrible overdoses and stuff, like it just all feels interconnected. And on one level, like it is interconnected, and is the way we're living our lives making us, as things get better, we're not getting better. But one, our stuff is getting better. So it's just not good to, if we're trying to look at, and we're not getting, like you said, we're not going to go deep dive on life expectancy. But if the point of products getting better is for our lives to get better, you got to start at least understanding the premise that a lot of stuff has gotten better. So what can we do to make life better if our stuff is better?
Well, I just, my frustration with this story, and I recognize it as somebody who has worked in newsrooms and who consumes media, is a guy. I was talking to a guy, executive, at a big company, and he was asking me about the media, and he was saying, it's like, I see some of these stories run, and like, does anybody ever ask, like, is this true?
Right.
And I was saying to him, yes. I mean, people
Yes.
do ask that question. Not every article is bad. But I did say to him that it's true that if you are in a journalism company and you are writing a memo, and the memo is going to the suits, right? And you are asking the suits like for money for some kind of initiative.
Yeah.
They will ask you like pretty hard. Like, is this true? Is your thesis that this is a good business opportunity actually correct? Because if your memo is wrong and you pitch them on an idea and it doesn't work out, like they will lose money and they don't want that.
Right.
If you spend a lot of time like slowing down the content generation process by being like,
is this true?
We need to like work harder on this. It's not, there's strong incentives to like don't libel people, but like the job is to produce articles. It's not to not produce articles. And so stuff comes off the line that like has not been really like had the tires kicked on it to be like, can we go through this like meticulously, line by line, and like hedge the claims, change the scope?
I think somebody did go line by line through this story, that a lot of the individual sentences are, it's a well-written story, right? Like this writer writes well. But even at the pitch stage, when you're saying everything has gotten worse, I think my next question would be to the writer, what do you mean by that? Right. And they're like, well, everything. Okay, well, really what about this and this and that? You would, even before the person started the piece, you're looking at the concept and honing in on what we're talking about. And I don't know the genesis of this piece, and we're all editors are busy people, and like you said, the goal is to create content, and ideally interesting content that people would like to read. Right. And so you're looking at a piece like this and it's going, oh, it's got a real thesis, right? Everything is bad. And that is an appealing thesis these days on the internet. So it's like, okay, this person's a good writer and it's an interesting thesis. And I have told my boss I will have it for Thursday, and it comes in and you just kind of dust it off and send it through. I get it. That's really not great journalism. And I think that if I had this piece in front of me, I'd have to send it back to the writer to do a lot of work and say, hey, can you focus on this? And then she'd have to go back and do a lot more work, and she'd have to rewrite it. And
what's interesting is that having run this piece doesn't actually like stop you from in the future essentially like recycling 70% of the work to produce a more focused.
Sure. Anyway, the point is, I do want to do a little disclaimer. I was thinking about this of, you and I have written for lots of places. Our bylines have appeared everywhere, but you were a co-founder of Vox.
I was.
And I was an early joiner of Vox, and this piece ran in Vox, but we picked it to talk about because I could imagine it running a lot of places. This is not, us talking about Vox. It's about the piece and the concept of it. And I think it represents a type of piece we see lots of places.
Well, I think it represents, right? I mean, something that we know is that like really strong claims just sort of like perform better.
Yeah.
On the internet, right?
Yeah.
So it's like you take whatever sort of factual material you have. Like, let's make this bigger, right? Like, because that is what works. And I would say, if I was to talk about things getting worse, the technology of media consumption is definitely better than it used to be, right? Like, I can get an article that was written 10 days ago, which used to be really challenging. I can get, like, if I'm interested in something, right, in the builder's remedy in Santa Monica, California, and how that's impacting local real estate development, I can read a good article on it from the LA Times.
Yeah.
Right? Which I didn't used to be able to do, but like because I'm interested. I can catch up. I wanted to look up something about what's going on in Jamaican politics. And I could get daily newspapers from Jamaica just like at my fingertips. But then you have this other question, which is like the information climate better as a result of all of this? And there's a sense in which it isn't, right? It's like there's this like buzz and confusion, and everyone is trying to write the most dramatic headlines that they possibly can. And there are 90 billion outlets, and you have no idea what's going on. And like, there's much less coverage of like routine local news than there used to be. And I think you could make the case, I'm not 100% sure, but I think you can make the case that we are becoming sort of worse served as like citizens and community members by the media. Not despite, but almost like because of.
What technology has done is, while previously as a, say, resident of Los Angeles, you're going to read the Los Angeles Times, that what connects you to most of your media consumption is about place-based identity. Mm-hmm. And now that has collapsed because the internet, I can read whatever newspaper I want. And increasingly what we've discovered is that the definition of identity is much more about political identity and value identity, and the way that you sort yourself is by interest and views of the world, not
by place.
By place. So it has dropped that. And in doing so, if you're a national publication that's trying to reach a broad audience, you're trying to think about your audience in those terms of, okay, here's a piece of content that will appeal to people based on, you know, their attitudes towards shopping, not their attitude towards shopping in Miami. It's you know, you're looking for these national angles, and we've found again and again on the internet that this is something I learned at Vox, of the idea of when people share an article, it's as much about what the article says about them as what the article says. So if you're reading this piece and you see the headline and you get the gist of it, it's tempting to share it based on the idea of, yes, I am a person who believes consumerism has gone wild. People are buying too much stuff. We have too much stuff in our lives and it's all junk. And I'm that kind of person, and I want to hold up this article as that. I think you and I are people who I identify maybe more as a skeptic when I read something, and that's part of maybe my identity. So I'm very less likely to share something defined this way. And that's what happens in media. So it's the job of reporters and editors to really think through what am I trying to say here, and can I really support it, and can I put aside a headline, the best headline that I can get, in favor of maybe a less hot, more warm headline that's true.
Right. Well, except, I mean, again, you know, what I think is interesting here is that I sort of appreciate the sentiment, right? Like, I think that the reason this resonates is a sense that the evolution of the consumer economy is not like serving human well-being in some sense. And just that the explanation of like how that has played out is not correct. Right? That like the thesis being offered here is that the evolution of the consumer economy under, you know, global capitalism or whatever has degraded the quality of the products that we're consuming, which I just don't think is right. But I think that it resonates because I do think there's something to the idea that like what we want is to I don't know, like live longer, healthier, happier lives.
Right.
And that has not necessarily been occurring. And the question of why that is very important and deserves real interrogation. I mean, we were talking about opioid overdoses, right? And, one way to think about that is that, there's a consumer product, right? Opioids, and it has gotten a lot better thanks to the innovation of fentanyl, which can be manufactured in arbitrary locations. It doesn't require the cultivation of poppy plants. It is also much more potent on a volumetric basis, so it's much easier to smuggle. And so as a result of these huge improvements, we now have much more availability of this highly addictive substance, and lots of people are dying as a result, right? So, that's bad, but it's because the drugs have gotten better.
I think, yes. Well, I mean, that's one way to look at it. In terms of consumerism, if you go back to the root cause of this crisis, it's, we've seen the emails that came out among these pharmaceutical leaders who were making jokes about getting people hooked on these things. And we knew, the data just showed that these things were being overprescribed. That the goal was to sell people this highly addictive drug and get them to keep buying it and get insurers to keep paying for it. And so when you're thinking about consumerism and making our lives better, our pharmaceutical industry in that case the goal was not let's make something good and it will be so good lots of people will want to buy it, but it was let's make something addictive and people are going to buy it. That's where I think the sentiment of we're being sold stuff and it's not making our lives better is certainly, that is a fair example of that.
And that would sort of be where I would take this, right? I mean, obviously, this is well known, the scandals around Purdue, and there have been, lawsuits and criminal charges and huge exposés. But it's sort of how much of the contemporary economy is driven not as extreme, right, as prescription opioids to fentanyl levels of addiction and hazardousness, but sort of compulsion type behaviors, right? I mean, whenever I read about how does Facebook Meta operate, the website Facebook, the service Instagram, there's a lot of really smart people work there, right? Doing optimizations, doing machine learning, try to understand, what people want. And the goal of all of that is to make the apps more compulsive, to make people want to keep scrolling. And we sort of moved beyond, I think, at the cutting edge of social media, moved beyond the Facebook and Instagram feed to they're trying to do Reels to compete with TikTok, because TikTok is based on it's completely kicked aside the concept of the social network where you follow your friends or something. It just it shows you video. And then based on your reaction to the video, it tries to show you more videos that it thinks you will like. And it's good at that.
It's an interesting, where place-based identity dropped. What we're starting to learn is our identities around even our community of friends, wherever they are, is less interesting to us than really compelling video that we personally find interesting, regardless of who shared it. It doesn't matter to me if I know that my friend shared it or a stranger shared it. It's interesting to me.
As a cranky old person and dad, I mean, I think about this all the time. I think about times that I spent when I was young being bored because I did not have content that was available to me that I really, really wanted. Right? It wasn't Saturday morning, so there weren't any cartoons on. Or I had read the kids' books that were in my house, and there weren't any more of them. And I didn't want to sit in a chair staring at a blank wall.
Okay. So I just want to drum roll and find out what baby Matt Iglesias did when he was bored.
But no, I mean, it's just
what did you do?
I read other books that weren't optimized for you know what I mean? That it wasn't okay, this is a book that has been designed to maximally appeal to this 12-year-old.
Sure.
But it was just of the books that are here.
Yeah.
It's the one that seems most interesting to me, and it is more interesting than doing nothing. Right.
Sure.
And that pushes you to consume movies and TV shows and books that you wouldn't have otherwise read, right? Whereas if you live in a world of, so my son likes to read these kind of like Minecraft fan fiction books that he gets on his Kindle Unlimited. And there's just an incredible quantity of them. And like, it's great that he reads. Like, he's 7 and he's learned to read well. And I think that's amazing. And we want to support him in that. But it's the fact that there's this like bottomless well of like highly optimized content that we now need to sometimes say to him, like, you need to stop reading these books and like go read something else. Whereas my parents would have never like made me stop reading a book that I liked. But just because I would have run out, like it's like, so it's like parenting has been, when we were kids, at least as I remember, there weren't like limits on quote unquote screen time.
Well, I did. My parents were teachers, and my sister and I would have to agree as we got older. We could watch 30 minutes of TV a day, and we had to agree on what the 30 minutes would be. And she was older than me, so we would watch what she wanted, which was a stupid math show on PBS. But,
MathNet?
Yes. Well, MathNet, Square One, and then MathNet. I mean, I liked it fine, but I would have preferred something else. But anyway, so we only could watch 30 minutes of TV after we had finished our homework. And if I ever said I was bored, I would get, go read a book would be one. And if I didn't have any kids' books, it was like, well, go figure it out. Like, go find some Michael Crichton or whatever. Whatever is laying around the house. Or the two other options would be my mom would like tell me to go play pick up sticks, or she'd hand me a rosary. So I was taught very early not to mention if I was bored. Also, in terms of the unlimited, my parents were driven nuts by the number of Babysitter Club books that my sister and I would read. It was like, stop with these babysitter, like it seemed like they were endless. So I don't know how much parenting one way or another has changed, but the endlessness is about, there's an optimization towards your attention. And there are lots of other industries that try to play on that same idea of compulsion. You look at, there was a stunning stat in the Washington Post a number of years ago about how, for example, like the alcohol industry, they make most of their money from a tiny fraction of people who purchase beer or alcohol, whatever. And it's people who are buying like tons and tons and tons of alcohol. They're people who are buying, they're drinking a case of beer a day, or they're drinking an entire bottle of whiskey a day, and that's their margin. And so we have tons and tons of advertising, and it feels like general advertising, which they do. They want everyone buying alcohol, and they want you buying in restaurants, etc. But it's also about this idea of targeting people, like the most vulnerable people, right? People who are truly addicted to it. They are the ones that are the margin. You see it in gambling, you see it in sports gambling, that they want it to be addictive. And it's that most addicted people are, funding this. It's profitable because people are addicted. You look at fast fashion the same way. You go into Target and you're shopping, and it's like, oh, there's a new thing, there's a new thing, there's a new thing. And it's similar in a way to, TikTok showing you a new video, but you want the new thing, and it's hard. Candy, same thing, it's colorful, it's there, it's catching your eye. And that stuff has been optimized, where they pay to put it in certain places in the store. And so I don't think any of that is particularly new, whether it's technology or not, that, TV has always wanted to get you hooked. Like, everything wants to get you hooked.
Right.
And it's smart people who are advertising in a smart way, who are packaging their stuff in a smart way and wanting us to consume more and more and more, because that's how you make money. And so you then have to target subgroups. This is, I have sympathy again towards the notion of overconsumption, because it's not for our well-being. Like, Meta's not like, oh, what would be good for society? They're like, no, how do we keep Laura on our platform? Not what would be good for any of us.
And I guess sort of how I feel about this stuff, it's not even that I'm like against overconsumption or what that means exactly. I'm not quite sure of. But if you think about sort of big problems in life, that this kind of the stuff getting better is not like, I don't know, it's not like making it easier to navigate the dilemmas of modern parenting. It's not making it easier for people to form fulfilling relationships with other human beings. It's not, you know, if you look at like other areas of discourse, right? Like it's not like providing a solution to the problem of sexual harassment in the workplace. And not to say like fast fashion is to blame for sexual harassment, right? But that like there's this kind of indexing on like, okay, well, what if the thing that got better in the past 10 years got even better?
Sure.
Right? And in specific areas, when we were talking about energy sources, like that really is good, right? Like there's a big substantive social
Batteries
problem that is related to how do we get and store electricity. And we are making like big progress there because that really is a consumption problem, right? Like electricity is so good. Like it's so useful to have like lights and stuff like that. But there's also all this bad pollution associated with it. So like making our electricity consumption like better and easier is like it's really making the world better. I think unfortunately there actually aren't a lot of social problems that have that characteristic. Where like if our stuff was better, it would solve the problem. And that's just kind of what we're stuck with as a society, that like we are improving, but it doesn't matter in a really sort of important kind of way, because it's hard to think of like, well, what kind of product like would make you feel better about the idea that like the police department operates without accountability to the citizens? But it's like the things that are really bothering people about their lives and about society are not super amenable to alleviation.
You're pointing out that fast fashion is not the cause of a lot of our social problems, our social ills, but I think one of the biggest problems in America is obesity, and it is a contributing factor to decline in health in America, and it's like a leading cause of preventable death in America. And that is very much driven by overconsumption and having companies think of ways to sell us more and more and more. And that is not at all in this article. So this is just me thinking about what are ways that the trend towards getting us to buy more and more, use more and more, that is a place that I think there's a direct connection. The problem is it's not a new product that's going to solve it. It's literally getting people to buy less. But you can't, like we've talked about the drugs and surgeries that can help people lose weight once they're obese. And that's great. Those are great products that have met a need, but to have ongoing success of keeping weight off and not gaining it back, there's this other sector that's not improving.
Well, and it's a Red Queen's race, right? Where it's like, look, if like, people who manufacture and sell food would like to sell more food.
Right.
And you could imagine a world in which, for a long time, people's height was going up, right? Because nutrition was improving.
Yes.
I don't know why it is that like we're not all 7 feet tall now as a result of more calories being available to us. But like that's not how it works.
Right.
And so innovation to be like the quality of the donuts that are available has really improved in my lifetime.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
But it's like, that's not good for me.
No.
And it's not really good for society. If I traveled back in time to my life in 1990s New York and to the early excitement about the opening of the first Krispy Kreme in my neighborhood, which people were pretty, enthusiastic about.
I remember the Krispy mania.
Good. That's a good donut. I don't think any of us would have said, like in a calm, reflective way, like having better donuts available is going to really make our lives better. Right? Like, we knew at the time that we were lining up for that Krispy Kreme.
Yeah.
That like, that's not very healthy.
Sure, but it's better than the donut I typically eat.
I think the term fast fashion is a deliberate like homage to fast food.
Yeah.
And to the idea that like the innovations in fast food, while sort of convenient and cool, have in some ways had harmful downsides. I think it's like harder to actually make that case about fashion. You know, I mean, it's interesting. The point of the specific point about the bra is interesting. I found that to be an interesting business story about a class of products that I don't buy, but it's still an interesting like feature of the world. But, you know, the point about food is not that the food has gotten worse. It's that the food getting better or like more appealing at least or more available has significant downsides.
I don't know about that. I think that you might have a little bit of a tunnel vision on what you eat in America, that you're like, oh, I you know, these artisanal donuts are so much better than they used to be. But if you go to any grocery store and look at, I mean, not even any grocery store. I think of this Walmart.
There's like a wider range of foods for, you know, we can get out of season fruit that we didn't used to have.
But that's not the problem of obesity. The problem is that when you have like huge bakery sections where very cheap sugary stuff is stacked on top of each other and it's bright colored and it's easy to buy and they're in much larger portions than they used to be, and they're cheaper, or like they're so cheap as other foods are getting more expensive, and sugar has addictive qualities. And I don't know that a cupcake from the grocery store is any better today than it was before. I don't think that it's
but you're saying it's larger and cheaper. So like that's better,
right? But you're saying that the tastiness, the variety of foods that are available are so much more tasty.
Yeah,
that has caused the obesity problem. And I'm saying that a Coke is a Coke is a Coke, right? The Coca-Cola, like soda, is not better. It's literally the same, but it comes in bigger containers than it used to.
No, but also you can go to those multi-function Coke machines, you know, that they have in the fast food places now.
Yeah, but
you can get the vanilla Coke, the cherry Coke.
Well, it's the same. No, it's a Coke. I mean, ultimately, it's not artisanal donuts that are behind the obesity.
Well, I'm not.
Claim. Like I just think it's useful.
That's not what I'm trying to say, though. I'm not trying to say artisanal donuts are like a primary cause of obesity. I'm trying to say that food availability is an area in which, right, the job is to serve the customer.
Yes.
And to make things that are more appealing to eat.
Yes.
And that has been occurring across like many dimensions. Right. Like it's both the same shit you could get before. Right. Just like marketed better or packaged better, or it's a little bit cheaper. There's also just like more stuff. There's more variety.
That's true.
Available constantly.
I mean, ice cream flavors, like, let's be real, it's just bananas in the ice cream aisle. There's so many types.
And there have been quality improvements, right? Like there's not just McDonald's, there's Shake Shack. There's not just Taco Bell, there's Chipotle.
It's not that the point of Chipotle was not to transition McDonald's eaters into Chipotle. It was like to get a market of people who were not eating at McDonald's to eat at Chipotle. So it's like to me, it's like defining deviance down, where you're trying to get people who are not eating fast food to buy your product, so they're making it a little better. Like Shake Shack was like, hey Laura, you don't eat at McDonald's, but it's like good quality food, go eat it.
Sure.
And so it's opening up a new market.
Yeah.
Like that's what I think a lot of fast casual is about. It's about opening up a new market to get more people to buy a thing. I would suspect that the issue with obesity is not that people who were eating fast food, like a McDonald's fast food, are now also eating fast casual, and that's the health problem. It's that more people have now become involved in eating this stuff, and I just sort of doubt it.
I mean, I'm just saying it's multidimensional, right? It's not just quarter pounder with cheese; it's double quarter pounder, right?
Yeah.
I guess what I am trying to say, a point that I would like to make about this is that it is progress, right? It's just bad for you. Like the fentanyl is superior to heroin, right? Like if you're looking at like what is the problem in the heroin marketplace? It's that like it's too hard to get this across the border. The fentanyl helps, right? Like why have a quarter pounder when you could have a double quarter pounder, or it's a deluxe with bacon, right? It's like it's more better, but consuming these things is not good for us.
Yeah.
And that to me is much more if I want to tell a, big negativity, like bad vibe story about 21st century America, that is what I would say, that while we have had in electronics and energy important kinds of progress, we've also had progress in harmful.
Yes.
In just like things where like a little bit is fine, right? I mean, if you ate one donut a year,
yeah,
you would have a blast and like no ill health effects, right? Like it's actually that's quite bad, right? And that's the nature of like compulsions. But obviously, if you're selling donuts, you make more money if people buy one every day than if they buy one every year. And fast fashion has some of the same like structural attributes, but like it's actually not harmful to have a lot of different shirts.
Right. I mean, you'd have to then start to look at, well, anyway, we could spin out and say, okay, well, then what is, she does bring up the labor market. And so we can look at the fast fashion and other harms that are created by having more shirts and things that are made out of different products that never break down.
Someday we should do a labor take.
Anyway, well, there's labor and then there's environmental takes that, there isn't individually probably a big problem with owning more shirts, but there is an environmental problem with owning more shirts, that it is contributing to a larger social problem than maybe we've acknowledged in this conversation. But in terms of the individual consumer, the individual consumer is not way worse off there's no real harm there in owning more shirts, but sector-wide.
It's a closet space crisis.
It is.
Afflicting Americans. Okay, so I mean, I feel like we've
reached an agreement here.
We're kind of running this down. So I thought it was bad.
Me too. I thought it was bad.
All right. So I mean, we're agreed. There's a lot of we should look at life expectancy comprehensively, because I think that's like we're both interested. All right. So this has been another episode of Bad Takes from Grid. We are produced by District Productive, and we will be back next week with more Bad Takes.